Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the first in our fall webinar series. My name is Jessica DeGraff, and I'm the Director of Retail Accounts here at Proven Winners. And I, along with our Retail Solutions team, have the really unique opportunity to work with and champion independent garden centers. And our goal is to help you to really leverage the programs and the support tools that the brand offers. But more than that, really to focus on how do we help you to drive more consumers to your garden center as the trusted source for Proven Winners plants. So before we get started today, I just wanted to run through just a couple housekeeping items to let you know sort of how the webinar is going to function today. So the first thing is that all attendees are in listen-only mode. But that said, we absolutely love your interaction. We would love to capture your questions or chat with you as we go through the webinar. So there's a couple ways that you can do that. You can utilize the chat function on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen or the Q&A function. I'm very blessed today to have Kate Spurgeon, who is a part of the Proven Winners team, and Kate will be managing the chat and the Q&A sections. So if you have questions, if you have comments, Kate is going to be interacting with you. Something else to mention, I know we always get a lot of questions about this. This webinar is being recorded. We will clean up the webinar recording. We'll have it available for you very early next week at the Proven Winners website. So you're more than welcome to watch this again. I know Dr. Knuth would love that. You're welcome to share it with your team. But I am so unbelievably excited today to introduce you to our guest speaker. Dr. Melinda Knuth is just an amazing resource, and she's going to be talking to us today about marketing plans to engage the conscientious consumer. You know, we talk a lot about sustainability in our industry, and we talk a lot about how do we connect with that new consumer. Mel is going to be talking about that today, but I wanted to share just a bit of background for those of you that are not familiar with Dr. Knuth. She's an assistant professor at North Carolina State University. But what I think is so amazing about Mel is that she's young, she's engaged, and she has just done a huge amount of work already in our industry. So Mel has worked with the likes of Dr. Charlie Hall. He was her PhD chair, as well as Dr. Bridget Behe at Michigan State University. And she's very hyper-focused in on consumer behaviors and really looking at what are those benefits of plants? She's also done some research with water conservation and has played an integral role in some of the research that Dr. Behe has done via eye tracking software. And so I'm not going to say too much more about Mel. I think once you sit through part of this webinar, you're going to understand why I'm so excited she's here today. She's a breath of fresh air, and I want to turn it over to her and let her talk a little bit more about marketing.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. All righty, so there it goes. All right, hello everybody. My name is Dr. Melinda Knuth, as Jessica said, and I just wanted to, first off, before I get started today, I just wanted to thank Jessica for inviting me to give this webinar, to have this opportunity to speak to the different independent garden retail center constituents that are associated with Proven Winners. And I'm very excited about this presentation. And so when Jessica approached me, she said, hey, I really liked this article that you did in Green Profits related to conscientious consumers. And so we got on the phone and we started talking, and I said, oh, well, I'm also working on this, and I'm working on this, and I'm working on this. And she said, okay, well, I want you to talk about all of this stuff on the webinar. So I would like to make an amendment to my presentation title today. It's marketing plans to engage the conscientious customer and more. So we're going to talk about a couple different topics today. And I just wanted to provide a quick roadmap on the different things that I'm going to discuss. So these are projects that I have worked on, am currently working on. And as you can see, they're specifically related to consumers. This is an area that I am really into. In fact, This is my specialization is in horticulture marketing and consumer behavior. I dabble into economics as my PhD advisor with Charlie Hall. So I do a little bit in that arena, but I primarily focus on consumers and what consumers want. So we're going to start first with conscientious consumers and talk about sustainability, as well as what the environmental consumer is desiring and how that's affecting us in the long term. Then we're going to talk about mental health and kind of the benefits of plants. We're going to then also talk about houseplants because they're still hot. It's not going away yet, or yet going to stay, whatever words you want to use there. We're then going to talk about online versus in-person shopping perceptions, which also interacts with social media. And lastly, we're going to talk about diversity. So we're going to talk about a variety of topics. And I know it seems like, oh man, how do these all relate? Well, these all relate because it all is about consumer behavior. And I want to first off start by saying and reminding people, if you've seen me present before, you've seen this slide. But for those of you who've not seen me present before, I'll explain what I mean by this. So when we talk about consumer behavior, so when psychologists study consumer behavior, when neurologists do, when marketers do, we always start with perceptions and understanding perceptions first, because perceptions shape our attitudes as people. Our attitudes then determine the behavior that we present to others in our environments. So how you think, well, first of all, how you think about yourself, how you think about ideas, objects, will determine your attitudes or your emotions, and will ultimately determine how you behave. So let's keep this in mind as we're going through the different slides today. The first topic area that I want to delve into is the benefits of plants. And I would first like to thank our funding source for this project, the Floriculture and Nursery Research Initiative, which is part of the USDA, not SCRI, oh my goodness, the USDA group who funded this research. And I would also like to thank my co-authors and colleagues on this who are also working on this project, Alicia Reen, Bridget Behe, and Charlie Hall. And you're going to see in all of these projects, I don't work singularly on any of them. I am a collaborative worker. That's something I've learned from my mentors. That's something I believe that we should do in science and also in our industry, because it just leads to better results. More people discussing results, more people communicating leads to more innovation. So first, let's talk about conscientious consumers. And I brought a couple memes in today because I like a little humor in my presentations. So what we found, we did an online survey and we were looking at, okay, so we want to know what, do people care about the environment if they are plant people? And you're probably like, well, that would intuitively make sense, but what does that relationship actually look like? And then secondly, we wanted to know, do people who care about the environment, how does that relate to other perceptions about themselves, related to mental health, perceptions about their physical health, about them as humans? So when we did this survey, we asked questions not only on a future template about their environmental concern. We asked them questions that were taken from therapy and psychological methodologies to look at physical and mental health effects that are happening. And what we found is that people who had a future mindset, especially related to the environment, so they were future focused, really interested in that. We found that for these kind of people, if they purchased one type of plant, they were more likely to purchase other types of plants. And what this means is that our plant consumers, if they like one product category, they're very likely, once they determine, oh, I actually like this product category, they're more likely to try other product categories and to expand and to experience other areas and to try different things. So in general, plant people are non-discriminatory when it comes to plant types. And this is really good for our industry to know because when consumers come in, they're not necessarily, if they say, oh, I'm looking for an annual plant. That doesn't mean that, oh, for your employees, okay, well, if they're interested in an annual plant, I should only show them annuals. Oh, no. This type of information says if they like annuals and they have experience in annuals, they're also more likely to also like other plant categories as well. So this is where having that upselling and really engaging with your employees to share information about, oh, well, if you like this Calibrachoa, it goes really well with this Echinacea, and they can be right next to each other in this garden bed, etc., and really do the upsell into other plant categories. So this is where these memes come into play. And when you buy your first house plant, really excited meme. When you buy your 237th house plant, really excited meme. What we also found from this information is that the more the plants, or if people are willing to buy one plant, they're willing to buy also many plants. So it's also really interesting to see that for our plant consumers, it's not just I'm going to go into the garden center and buy one plant. I'm going to go into the box store and buy one plant. They want to come in and, just like this second meme, they want a lot of plants, and they want to fill their spaces with plants based on different reasons, whether that be beautification, other benefits of plants, or mental health benefits, social benefits, etc. What was also interesting when we were looking at these consumers is that those who had foresight for the future environment also reported having more positive mental health. And this was also related to their plant purchasing. This is also really good for our industry because this tells us that people who are environmentally focused, which are a lot of our plant consumers, they care about the environment, they're into composting, they're into growing their own fruits and vegetables, and local markets. So a lot of our consumers are into those sort of sustainability and environmental efforts. And with this was related to more positive mental health. This type of information, although is difficult to say, okay, well, how do I use this directly in my marketing? Well, one of the ways that you can use this is by sharing that, taking care of the environment does also help your mental health. Using messaging like that, or talking about the fact that, this plant is good for your mental health and it's good for the environment. Having messaging like that can point to, oh, this plant not only is beautiful, but it also can do this benefit for me. You can also do that with your environmentally focused products. So if you're selling compost or compostable plastics, or if you're selling biodegradable products, so biodegradable tags, biodegradable pots, you can also use that type of messaging. So this is happy for the environment, and this is also happy for your mind. So that can also be market messaging that you can use throughout your entire garden center. What was also interesting when we looked at the conscientious consumer is that we also asked them, okay, so we want to know what kind of plants that you like and which ones that you don't necessarily like. And this was really interesting because we asked them all of the categories that were in the USDA national survey, which include annuals, perennials, flowering trees, flowering shrubs, evergreen trees, you get the picture, like lots of different categories. And we asked them about all those different categories. what we found is that when we grouped them by their environmental focus, so whether that's low consideration for the environment, moderate consideration, or high consideration, it actually changed the way that they were purchasing plants. So what we found is it made no difference for annuals and perennials, but it did make a difference for woody plants and house plants. What I mean by that is for people who had low consideration for the environment, they actually were less likely to choose houseplants, which I thought was really interesting. We are still investigating why that is, like why do they not like houseplants? But they just really didn't like houseplants there. For moderate consideration, they had a high propensity for choosing woody plants. And a lot of the reason for this is because these are more long-term plants that take a long time to establish. And these kind of consumers are also future focused about environmentalism. So these plants that take longer to establish work well for these type of consumers because they're very future focused. So it's a nice pairing there. What was also interesting is that high consideration for the environment was also related to indoor plant purchasing. And I think the reason for this one specifically is that these people were really, they want plants indoors and they want plants outdoors. They're so into environmentalism and being connected to nature that they want it to be all around them no matter where they're at. So they want to really bring it indoors. And this was a really high relationship. It was around 40%, which in the world of statistics and economics, that's a lot. That is a big relationship. And so with that being said, that's why I believe that the high consideration people were really into indoor plants. With this, we also found that purchasing annual plants also improved mental health ratings the best, which was really interesting. So the people who were really into purchasing annual plants and purchased them the most had the best mental health ratings. And we spent a lot of time, my colleagues and I spent a lot of time thinking about this, like, ooh, okay, that's really interesting. And one of the reasons that we think this is true is because of the instant gratification that comes from the purchase. A lot of times annual plants have flowers on them, and with them, they grow rather quickly. And it's a rather fast plant in general, where you see an effect on what you're doing to the plant. And so because of that reason, there is, you see a quicker response to what you're doing, which may lead to a higher improvement and more positive associations with that plant. That's not to say that other plant categories are not important to these people. It just, because annual plants seem to have a quick response in terms of growing, they improve the best. And so we term this as an instant gratification style purchase. And so for this type of marketing, this would be where if someone says, I want to be cheered up, or, I don't know how close in relationship your employees get to your customers. But if they have a closer relationship and they're going through a hard time, maybe suggest that they get an annual plant. Or if they don't seem the happiest in the garden center, you could suggest that, or have some sort of messaging related to mental health related to your annual plants as well. So that's a more of a subconscious nudge there with more messaging rather than direct communication with your customer. Okay, so that is in general the conscientious consumer. And we have, oh my goodness, we have so much data related to that. So please keep a lookout for Alicia, Bridget, Charlie, and I are going to be coming out with a series of articles related to that data. So please keep a lookout for that. We're also going to be releasing more information, along with webinars like this. So very happy to share that type of information. So other things related to sustainability, or I'm going to go back quick. Other things related to sustainability that I think are really interesting and are coming forward in the future. And what we're seeing in the literature is that a lot of consumers are wanting sustainability products and desiring sustainability in packaging, in their products in general. Not, it hasn't been specifically requested in plants yet. I've seen a little bit, but it's not to the level of other product categories. But it's coming. And we're seeing it in the European market. They're getting it a lot. So we usually trail the European market by 5 to 10 years. So it is coming to the United States. It's just a matter of when. But in general, what we've noticed in the literature is that people say that they're willing to pay higher amounts for sustainable products, but in the follow through, that doesn't always occur. So where they say they're willing to do it, the follow through may or may not actually be occurring. And the reason for that is because people may be overestimating the value that they place on sustainability. That could be one reason. Another reason could be that the overall product, so the product offering is, it's not just about the sustainability of the product that they're purchasing it. It's also the color of the plant, the color of the shirt, the material it's made out of, where they're purchasing it from. So there's all of these other units of measurement that are in play. And so that's also affecting the purchase along with the sustainability. So it's not, so that doesn't always follow through. So all that to be said, just be mindful of that. If your consumers start asking for sustainable products, I highly encourage you to offer them. Just don't price them too high or, too much of a margin, simply because research has shown that the follow through there is not there a lot of the time. So please just keep that in mind as you're going forward with your purchasing. And I'm not saying that to discourage from using sustainable products. I think it's great. It's good for the environment. It's good for social issues. And it should be also good for your wallet as a business and a customer. So those are the 3 pillars of sustainability. So it all has to be there to work. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now about sustainability. So, okay, another area of the benefits of plants that I am highly involved in is specifically looking at mental health. And I've talked about that a little bit related to environmentally focused people, but now I want to focus singularly on mental health and what that means. So people who have more positive mental health ratings, they tend to buy more plants and purchase more plant types. And we looked at this effect. So this happens to be a causal effect. But we aren't sure which way it goes. Is it because you're buying plants, it makes you happy, or because you're happy, you're buying plants? It's kind of like, is it the chicken or is it the egg? And we still, as researchers, have to figure that out. But what we know is there's an effect there, and it is very good. So what we're seeing is that people who have more positive mental health, they're more active outdoors, and they also are more interested in our industry. So they're buying more plants, they're spending more on plants, and they're buying more plant categories. So this is fantastic news for our industry, and really just showcases the fact that past literature and what Charlie and I have saying about the benefits of plants for the past eons, it feels like, about mental health and about the benefits of plants. As we do more research and as we look at this more and more, there's just more evidence to show that there's a clear connection between mental health and the mental health benefits that plants provide to people. Okay. The next topic I would like to talk about is houseplants. And before I get started, I wanted to again thank the sponsors of this study, which is the American Floral Endowment. And also, I would like to thank my colleagues who helped with this project and worked with me, which is Heike Kelkatron and Charlie Hall. All right. So within this study, what we did was we wanted to know, okay, well, what does houseplant purchasing looked like? And we asked not only purchasers, but non-purchasers of houseplants. And we asked about all these different categories, from flowering houseplants, native or narrow-leaved, broad-leaved, all the way down to bromeliad, succulent, cacti, and air plant. We asked all these different categories, ask consumers about all these different categories because prior to this, no one had looked at these categories and asked consumers about their attitudes and behaviors related to houseplant purchasing down to this level. What we found with purchasers is quite a few things. So 48% of purchasers felt that when asked, are you more likely to buy a plant because of the actual plant or the container? 48% said it's the plant that is more important than the container. So that means the 51% either said it was the same or said it was the container was more important. And I have another slide coming up here that's going to explore that a little more. So, hold the brakes there if you have a question about that. Also, 31% said that they spent more time caring for their houseplants during the pandemic, and they wanted to continue to keep it up after the pandemic. So this bodes really well for our industry. And we've seen this continuation into 2022, a little bit into 2023. I've heard some conversations may or may not. We are thinking about doing another collection here to understand why, it has this attitude change. So stay tuned for that. 46% buy houseplants 2 to 3 times a year. That's the most common amounts that they're purchasing houseplants. And the most popular rooms, 70% are putting houseplants in either their living room or their bedroom. What was interesting is the least popular room was the bathroom. But people still said that they put them in the bathroom. There's about 20% who were putting their houseplants in their bathroom. So most of these purchasers are comfortable purchasing online or over the phone. So they're coming in store, they're buying online, they're doing, or they're buying over the phone. They're buying all across the board. It comes down to what type of houseplant it is and what specifically they're looking for with the houseplant. So if they're a collector, the specific species or down to cultivar that they're looking for, or sometimes it's a particular price point that they're looking for. It comes down to that more so than the mode in which they purchase. Also, 52% of the sample owned at least one houseplant, and 12% owned more than 6 houseplants. So we can see here that there's that percentage of people, just like in the Facebook group, Houseplant Hobbyist. If you are not in that group, I highly encourage you to join, simply because from a human behavior standpoint, it is so interesting. That is one of the areas that I did some scoping out of research just to look at, these people. Some of these people have over 500 houseplants in their house. They are very zealous into houseplants, and they will spend hours discussing with other people on the internet about their houseplants. And I was just very intrigued by that. So I joined this group so I could watch what they're doing. Is it a little strange? Yes, but please know I'm a researcher, and I was doing it purely for research purposes, which actually helped develop some of the questions for this survey. But anyway, if you want to know what's currently hot in the hobbyist world, I highly encourage you to join groups like that on Reddit, on Facebook. Oh man, what are on TikTok. They have groups like that where they talk about these. And these groups, for example, the Houseplant Hobbyist group on Facebook is, I believe, like 30,000 people strong. So it's not a small group. It's a large group of people who are really into houseplants talking about them. Okay. And then lastly, my comments on purchasers of houseplants. 47% still like to purchase houseplants in store. 40% prefer online. And I think this bodes really well, especially for independent garden retail centers where you're offering both online and in person, because people want both. And there's some people who prefer in store, there's some who prefer online, and there's some who will do either. And they're comfortable doing either way. And so that's really important to have that multimodal shopping experience for your consumers. So the average spending by houseplant category. So when we looked at this, you can see, so the values on top of each of the bars are in US dollars. So for example, the blue bar, which is broadleaf foliage, is $85. The maroon one next to it is bromeliad, and that's $111. You can see that the two categories in which people paid the most money were bromeliads and indoor foliages. This is where they were paying the most money per plant, which was so interesting, I felt. The next category was indoor air plants and tillandsia, which also is really interesting because, you know, there's usually come in such small plants. But for these people, they were buying both online and in person. So that's where I believe that the inflation on these values comes from, is from people who are buying on marketplaces such as Etsy and houseplant websites, where these prices are much higher than in store and consumers are willing to pay them. So I alluded to this before, so let's talk about this. So the importance of the plant versus the container. So this is an area that I'm planning on exploring a little bit more in the future. But looking at, you know, we do spend a considerable amount of time in our industry branding pots, looking at pots, spending time with it, or spending time matching pots and matching containers with plants. And so I wanted to know how important a container is in this plant purchase decision. And with this, this was a bimodal question. What I mean by this is they could answer only plant, 2, which means like mostly plant, a little container, 3, still mostly plant, a little bit more container, both equally, over to 5, a little bit more container than plant, more container than plant at 6, and finally only container was important. And you can see here, most consumers were, like I said, it was 47%. So this group over here, these 3 groups, were primarily interested in the plant. But 36.8% of the sample was interested in both the plant and the container equally. So the container had an equal weight in their perception of their buying experience as the plant did. So plant quality, container quality were seen as the same. And I think this is so interesting because no one's looked at this before in research. So this is, again, an area I really want to explore more in depth in the future. But as retailers, this is really interesting because the pots that you pick out are important, and where you place your pots in the retail environment is also important. I highly encourage you to set up a little, oh my goodness. I just took a international garden retail tour in Italy, and they actually had a term for this in the European markets. So I apologize. I can't remember exactly what it is right now. But what they do is they'll set up a plant display, and right next to it, they'll put a shelf of fertilizer. So it's little containers of fertilizer. And on the other side, they'll put a shelf of different colored pots that fit perfectly with this plant. And it was really cool. So they would have all of this pink nerve plant, and they'd have a pink container of fertilizer, and then they'd have a pink pot. So it was all monochromatic in pinks. And it was completely tailored to be in the display, was completely interconnected together. And that's a great way to sell the complete package, not just a plant, but the plant. Right next to it is the fertilizer. Right next to it is the pot. And it all is incorporated together. And it's not only about aesthetic, like, oh, that plant is pretty, but it's about style. And it goes further than just being a plant. It's part of the immersion into the person's personality and also into the style of their home. So it's so interesting how these both can fit together. And also, speaking of proven winners, this also goes to say, having branded pots, this can be just as important as the plant because it communicates a lot of information to the consumer about the container. So who is it coming from? Knowing and trusting the brand, knowing, oh, this is a proven winners plant. I know that brand. I know they produce high quality plants. I trust this. And so pick it up, take it to the cash register. So stay tuned in the future. I'm really excited about stuff like this and to share more information related to this relationship between the plant and the container for consumers.
It's Jessica. Real quickly before you jump into the next topic, we've had a few questions pertaining to the demographics of this specific survey. Can you speak more to that, of who actually responded to the survey and what the demographic breakdown was?
Sure. So this was plant. So like I was saying, this is related to, so this was only purchasers. So this was plant people. So this is not the people who are, this was not the non-purchasers. For the purchaser demographics, they are more affluent. They're very similar to our average horticulture consumer. And what I mean by that is that they're mostly white, a little bit more affluent, a little bit more educated than the average US American. So I believe that the average, the median household income was around like 90 to 100 instead of around 70. And then I think the age was also a little bit higher. The average American's age is 36 years old, and I believe this sample was around like 40. But in general, when you compare what the average horticulture consumer is versus this sample, it's really similar in who they are. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Okay. So this is the plant in containers. Okay. We also asked about shopping outlet, and I thought that this would be very helpful, especially when we're talking about when I'm talking to garden centers. So I also got to check my time. Okay, cool. All right. So for shopping outlets, the top outlets that people were shopping from, and they could select any and all. So this is why you're not going to see everything add up to 100% here. But 30% were shopping, or approximately 30% were shopping at garden centers, and 30% were shopping at home improvement stores. And then 22% were shopping at super discount. So what I think is happening there, going into the reasons that they chose the outlet, the top reasons were price, selection of products, quality, and convenient location. Now, it's no secret that, independent garden centers tend to be more expensive than box stores. But this is not a bad thing. And here is why. Having a wider selection of products, having higher quality of products, and then also having locations and having that convenience of and service to these consumers is just as important as the price. You can see price is over here at 26%. The selection of product, quality is a little bit lower, but convenient location, these three are just as important as price. So if you can be superior in these other areas, then in price for box stores, you actually have a much greater chance of getting these different houseplant houseplants consumers, because this is what they want, and this is why they buy who they buy from. Okay. So that is in general about houseplant purchasers. And I thought this would be a good transition period to move into online and in-store purchasing, because I've talked about that a little bit with houseplants and how, you know, they want to buy on, some want to buy exclusively online, some want to buy in store. And so to follow up on that, there is a study that Bridget Behe and Alicia Reen and I did related to online versus in-store purchasing, and looking at different attitudes and perceptions of consumers related to these behaviors. So why do they choose to do one over the other, and how do they differ? So what we found, so first of all, back up a moment. So we ran this survey between March 2022 and October 2022. So right during that prime time of shopping for horticulture consumers. And we were really interested to know about, you know, what is your spending right now on plants, and where are you spending this money? And what we found is that in general, online, people tend to spend more. So this was the average amount that they're spending online versus in store. And you can see that online they're spending about $143 versus indoor they're spending about $135. So with this, they're spending about $7 more online. And when we look at the difference on what categories they're spending online, and I know this is a busy slide, I apologize for that. What I would like you to pay attention to is, I'm going to point it out. So you can see here, anything in red is online purchasing. Anything in blue is in-store purchasing. So this is the amount spent on plant purchasing online versus in-store. And you can see here that for online in general, they spent more in annuals and vegetables, in seed, way higher in seeds, in flowering shrubs, in flowering potted plants, a little bit in foliages, indoor succulents, and cut flowers. Where it was higher in store than online was in herbs, as well as in evergreens, fruits, shades, vines, and sods. So that's where, and I made little circles, so hopefully this makes sense. So red circles go with the categories that were higher with online purchasing. And then the blue ones are where it was higher in-store purchasing. So what we're seeing here is that, especially for online purchasing, you might consider, you could. I'm just saying it might be more cost efficient if you consider to have fewer and higher margin items in your online store, to keep in mind the costs of what it is to maintain an online website, because it does require additional inputs, just like in store where you have to have signage and you have to have tags. The same thing is true online. You have to have a landing page in order for people to go and click the button to buy that product, and it has to have a price associated with it, so when they go to the shopping cart, they're able to pay for it. And so with that in mind, consider having fewer options, but having those higher margin items. Looking at the previous slide here, in these areas, specifically annuals, vegetables, seeds, flowering shrubs, flowering potted plants, indoor cut flowers, in these different categories, this is where consumers are already paying much more. And so these are areas where you might consider increasing the margin versus what you're selling in store. Another thing to keep in mind as well for yourself is with that margin that you have, make sure that you're accounting for shipping cost. If you're not already, you should be, because it does cost you money to ship that product rather than your consumer coming to the store, buying the product and taking it away. You have to get it to them. And then for herbs, indoor foliage, and annual plants, these are the highest selling plants online. These tend to be the hottest product categories. And if you are starting an online store, or if you are considering shrinking your online store, whichever this may be, you may consider starting or shrinking down to these three categories for your online sales, because these are the top categories in which consumers are purchasing in online. And interestingly, annuals, indoor foliage, and flowering plants were the top in-store purchases. So keeping these in store, keeping large selections, keeping, especially for independent garden retail centers, keeping that unique variety, high quality plant indoors is essential there. And the key here, especially with like online versus in store, is you can think about these as separate windows of opportunity, and they can work together. They don't have to be divorced. They don't have to live separate, they don't have to live completely separately, but they are two windows of opportunity for you. The first is that in-store shoppers tend to spend less overall, but are more likely to buy plants online. But online shoppers spend more on plants, but they're not as likely to buy in store. So what this means is that indoor shoppers, they're going to come in and they don't spend as much on their plants, but they're reliable and they're your customer base that you are seeing face to face. And a lot of times these are consumers that want that face to face and want to have that personal interaction with you. And this is where your staff and your signage and keeping up face is really important at your retail garden center. And that's not new information that I'm sharing. So, but that is good business. For online shoppers, they tend to spend more on plants, but they're not as likely to buy in store. So this is where keeping up and having an excellent website is very important. And having a website that is able to be navigable, so you can navigate around it. And it's easy for them to find the shopping cart. It's easy for them to put their credit card information in. That type of nuances is really important, because if they get frustrated, if something is difficult, they're just going to go to a different website. And so there are ways to build loyalty with these online consumers, and they will pay premiums over your in-store people, like same plant, but they will pay premiums for the same plant. So they are worth your time, and it's an opportunity in both of these spaces. And one of the big reasons that we want to keep in store, and and also after the pandemic, everyone was like, come back, let's go, is because one of the biggest ways in which we sell plants in our industry is by impulse purchases. This is a really important behavior that we see with our consumers, is that as they're going around, they know in general they want to buy a plant, but they might not have decided what plant, or they may have. What is interesting in research, this general statistic, or excuse me, I'm going to go up here first. I'm getting too excited here. So customers tend to research their interests, so what they want and what they're interested in. And this is awesome. So what this means is this is an opportunity for you. So even though, let's say you don't want to sell plants online, that's completely okay. You should still have some sort of presence online. Either have a website where you have pictures of your plants or have social media presence where you have pictures of your products. The reason I say this is because 67% of garden and lawn shoppers conduct research prior to buying, prior to coming into your garden retail center, prior to coming there. And most of them do it so online. This is why it's really important to, even if you're not willing to do a web shop online, at least if you have a website, you need to have that for that reason, because many of them are looking for the product that they want there. Secondly, they might come in and say, okay, I know that this store exists. I'm going to come in. I know in general that I want a plant, but I don't know exactly what plant that I want. And that's where them, directing them, making it easy to find the information to come in, oh, here's our location. I don't know exactly what I want. I'm going to go into the store and do those impulse purchasing that is necessary and is so common for garden retail centers and for our industry in general. Now, when consumers research their interest, most of them do this online. Actually, in fact, 77% of consumers do their online researching on their phone. So it's really also important to consider, is the information about your garden retail center accessible on a mobile device? Is your website optimized to be able to be viewed on a mobile device? If 77% of people are looking for information on their phone, this should be a necessity for you. Simply because if there's a potential new customer who is looking for garden retail centers on Google, and yours is the one that pops up, and if they click on that and click on your website, and they can't read your website, they can't find the information that they're seeking, they're going to close out and they're going to go to the next one listed. So this is why it's very important that it's easily to access your information on a mobile device, and in general, have your information out there and up to date on a web page. Okay. Demographics of online versus in-store plant purchasers. So when looking at the difference here, online is listed first in each of these scenarios. So the online purchasers, they're actually younger than in-store. This is actually very normal, as expected. So 41 years old versus 48. They're more likely to be male. So only 45% of online shoppers are female. 81% of in-store shoppers are female. And their income is higher for online purchasers than in-store purchasers. The average online purchaser is from 80 to 90,000. The average in-store purchaser is from 40 to 49,000 annual income. So what we're seeing here is that more affluent consumers are shopping online, and more men are shopping online for plants, which is really interesting because traditionally our consumers have been primarily women, and we primarily market to women. But if many of our online shoppers are actually men, changing up our marketing tactics may be necessary in the future. Also, in addition to that demographic information, here's some more. So adults in household, there was no big difference there. However, there was a difference in the number of children. So online purchasers, they are not only younger, so 41 instead of 48 years old, but they have 1.85 children on average versus 0.5 children. So what this tells us, not that people are cutting up their children, that's not happening, but this tells us that more children live in households with online plant purchasers. So parents are more likely to be shopping online for plants than non-parents. What was also interesting is that there are more ethnically diverse individuals shopping online than coming in store. So only 23% of online shoppers was Caucasian versus 89% of in-store shoppers were Caucasian. That means that, let's see if I can do the math. That would be 76% of online purchasers are people of color, which I'm like exploding in my brain because this is so awesome for our industry. And I'm going to talk about this in a minute here on how we talk to these people and what should we talk to these people about. So with these online shoppers, they have more money, they're younger, they have more children. What are ways that you can engage with them? One of the ways is intergenerational projects. So having these available on your online stores and having activities to bring them into your garden center. So for example, here is earn your Veggie Garden Kids badge. So here they have to come in and do this activity at the garden center, and they earn a badge by doing that activity. So it's an easy way to get children into the garden center. When they're in the garden center doing an activity, what are their parents doing? They're looking around at your products. Great marketing. For online, there's a lot of activity related to getting children involved with gardening and having that connection. So actually having the words kids or kids first, having words like that, or, entry level is not a good word there, but easy. So easy garden bed, something like that, where it's associated with children and the way that children's toys are marketed. That's an easy way to market for intergenerational projects. Another one, for example, this is a product called Grow With Me Root Viewer. So different root vegetables, you get the seeds, and then the kids get to see the roots develop as the plants grow, and then they get to eat them afterwards. So the practical applications of this are more parents are buying online and making sure that if you have a web shop, do you have products that are available to appeal to parent-child activities or grandparent-child activities? So do you have both of those? Also, what is the ethnic diversity of the market that you serve? Are you marketing products in colors that might have greater appeal? And are you merchandising products that might appeal more to certain holidays and traditions of the people within your market? Especially with products and tools such as geofencing and Google Analytics, as well as the US Census Bureau. You can look at all of the information of who's the traffic coming to your webpage and also the traffic of the people who are in your area physically. And you can look at all this information and figure out who's near you and also who's looking at your stuff, basically. And are you looking at this information, first of all? And second of all, are you making sure that you have representation there to properly serve those people? Okay. What we found with online versus in-store purchasing also is that as age increases, the satisfaction with the quality of the plant decreases, as does the plant flower. Was the size that I expect, and the plant surviving and grew, or the cut flower survived a sufficient time? So in general, people were like, as you got older, or the older the consumer was, the less likely they would be satisfied with these things. But we also found that as age increased, satisfaction with the plant or flowers in the form that they expected, the satisfaction actually increased. So this is where, and this type of information, you might be like, okay, Melinda, what does this actually mean? This type of information means that making sure that you have accurate pictures listed on your website if you are selling online, also having accurate descriptions listed. And then also sharing information, so growing information, if that's applicable to the type of product that you're selling. So what are practical applications of this? So your company might be more used to largely female clientele, but there is more male clientele online. So using a broader color palette in backgrounds and flower colors, use those to appeal to a wider audience of individuals. So tailor your website to be towards the audience who's looking at that website. If it's mostly men, you might consider changing it from being light green, or if it happens to be pink, you might change it to gray, or you might change it to blue to be more gender neutral or to be more masculine presenting, since your consumers are more male. Also, using more useful or youthful models in addition to plants will help appeal to younger consumers. Image congruency works. So having younger models, having that fluency there with, okay, are you driving with the times, basically? This works. And this congruency will encourage people who are interested and engaged with that to come to your store. So they say, oh, I really like your vibe, if you've ever heard that, or, oh, I really like the way that your store is set up. That is congruency. So they like that. They're coming back because they like what you're doing. Also, higher price points and more profitable products should be the core products that you choose. Don't necessarily put everything online. As I was saying before, choose the things that are going to be profitable for you and that you and your employees can easily package and do and package well and send to consumers and have success with. And lastly, related to online versus in-store, online reviews impact customers' expectations when buying plants online. So when we asked, how does the I Trust online reviews, so how does online reviews affect all of these different areas on perceived overall quality? What if it arrives undamaged? The correct form that it comes in, the expected size, and the performance survivability. What we found is that if they trusted online reviews, there was a positive relationship with overall quality. So they were more happy with overall quality. They were happy with overall, if it came damaged, they were okay with that to a degree. So they wanted, trusted the reviews and they were working with that. From reading reviews, they were more satisfied with the correct form. And same thing with the expected size and performance. So from these online reviews, what they were getting was information that helped make this purchase more satisfying in the future. And what was interesting is that I often rely on online reviews when purchasing products online. This was also related to correct form. So people were specifically looking to see, okay, what form was it coming in? What I mean by this is it coming as a cutting? Is it coming in a 2-inch pot, a 4-inch pot, a 6-inch, a 2-gallon? Because there are different online entities who are not the most forthcoming with the form that it comes in. And because of that, and I'm speaking, I'm talking about Etsy here. I'll just say that plainly. And so sometimes they'll show the full plant in the picture, but you'll actually get a cutting and it's only in the fine print. And so that leaves a lot of unsatisfied consumers. So that's why they rely on these online reviews to help them understand what form that it's coming in. And so their expectations are met there. Whoops, I skipped okay. And across industries, 95% of consumers look at reviews before buying. And so this is, again, really pointing to having this integration with your online site. So Google reviews, or if you have reviews on your website, making sure that you are regularly reviewing your reviews that are on your website or on Google and responding when needed, because this is customer service online. If you have a bad review, that can go a long way with customers, and they see the way that you handle that review, and that tells them a lot about the way that you're going to interact with them potentially in the future if there's a problem. And if you react negatively, then or if they feel inappropriately, they may go to a different retailer, even if you have the product that they want. So make sure that you are responding professionally and positively as you can, and trying to show that you are fixing the situation when you get negative reviews. And when you get positive reviews, or when you get people who are happy with your products, encourage them to leave positive reviews, to engage with you in a positive manner, because customers rely on reviews to set expectations and make purchase decisions. So this information really helps them set expectations with you based on what other people are saying. Reviews are kind of a pseudo word of mouth in a way now. So instead of verbally saying, talking to each other, we write it anonymously to each other. And so you can think about these reviews as the same as word of mouth. Okay. And the last topic I'm going to talk about today is diversity in horticulture consumers. And I'm going to go rather quick through this because I am a little bit over time, and I'm so sorry, everybody. I'm very passionate about these topics, so as you can tell. So I'm gonna go through these. So diversity in horticulture. What do I mean by this? So the US is more racially and ethnically diverse than in 2010. We are in 2023 way more diverse. In fact, 24% of our population have become more diverse among racial groups since 2010. And this was information from the US Census Bureau in 2020. And then also, the US Census Bureau projects that beginning in 2030, net international migration is expected to overtake natural increases as the driver of population growth in the United States because of our population aging. What this means is that there are going to be more people immigrating into our country than people actually being born here. And this will also lead to more racial diversity than we've ever seen before. So because of these reasons, and because we've seen great increases in representation of horticulture consumers in the National Gardening Survey, also in that online plant purchasing survey that I just presented, we've seen lots of people of color interested in buying plants and being engaged with plants. So I set out to understand how likely are these people to purchase from stores if they had representation of their own ethnic or racial group. And this first question here is representation in store signage. And you can see here that 50% of the individuals who were part of the survey were somewhat likely or barely likely to purchase from and prefer a store to purchase from a store that had representation in the store signage. So what does this mean? So choosing color and genus selection in terms of what type of plants that you're selecting. And you can also choose to do this by doing plant selections based on religious holidays. So looking at, okay, during Hanukkah, having a sale or a special or some type of representation during Hanukkah from December 7th to December 15th, or during Ramadan from March 10th to April 9th, having those colors represented in your garden center, or having signage up celebrating the holiday, or even Holly, which is March 25th, which is also called the color holiday. So they spread color all over, having representation there based off of religious holiday, which is also heavily associated with ethnic and racial groups. Also having cultural days. So Chinese New Year, having a day, having representation in your signage related to that, or Kwanzaa or Dia de los Muertos. Other examples include also having representation in actually the people within your signage. So, for example, here, these people, instead of having white hands, which is the majority of marketing that is not only in the horticulture industry, but across the United States, having representation of Black hands, Asian hands, Hispanic hands in marketing and in signage around your retail garden center. Or even, for example, on the Starbucks sign, if you have a high population of Hispanics in your community, having English and Spanish on your signage can also be a way to be representative of these people who live within your communities. So I also asked them about how likely are they to purchase from retail garden centers that have representation and social media presence. And this was nearly the same, except it was a little bit lower. So 47% of individuals agreed with this. And just going forward with this, again, celebrating Asian, Black, Hispanic, and other racial or ethnic history and heritage months, acknowledging holidays of consumers in your area, and presenting diversity in whom you show in post, instead of, having more than just white people in your post. So making it more diverse. Another consideration to think about is if you're like, oh, well, I don't know who's in my community. Looking at your zip code and looking at the U.S. Census Bureau website, you can actually see the breakdown of the populations of income, race, gender. You can see all of that information by zip code on the U.S. Census website, so you can see who lives near you. And then also looking at the traffic, again, like I said, on your online platforms, you can see who's coming to your websites and who you're engaging with. And what was interesting as well is that not only were these people more likely to buy from stores that had representation in their signage, in their social media, in their employees, but also they were willing to pay premiums for products at these businesses. So they want to see that representation, and they are more likely to shop at stores that have representations for themselves. And this intuitively makes sense. They want to feel like they belong. I would feel that way as well. And so having this representation can pay off for the business, but also just having this representation in your community can lead to just more consumers coming to your retail garden center, and also engaging with more people who are getting into gardening, and that can lead to more loyal consumers in the long term. Okay. So with that is all I have to share with you today. So I covered quite a bit. I kind of went on some musings there. And I see I have quite a few questions. I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Mel. That was amazing. Lots of great information. So we've kind of compiled a few of the major questions. So
okay.
You talked an awful lot. We started with sort of houseplants. So I want to start there first. We had a couple questions pertaining to, you were looking at that houseplant consumer and the average person buying 2 to 3 times a year. Have you done any research, or is there any data to support when those purchases are happening?
Mm. So, it's about half the people are buying for gift, and it's holiday. And half of those people, it's anytime just for themselves. So it's pretty split equal. So probably, depending on the person, 2 out of the 3 purchases could be holiday and like birthday, baby shower, office related party purchases. But then for about half that sample, 2 out of the 3 purchases are just everyday purchases. I want a house plant type situation. So it's split pretty equally there.
Gotcha. And I know with some of the data that you were showing, so I'm going to segue into online sales specifically.
Yeah.
And so had a couple questions from folks as they were looking through your data, the difference between indoor and foliage, because I think a lot of us, we call them, sometimes those terms are used interchangeably.
Yeah. Is that for the houseplants?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So, what we mean by that is indoor flowering versus just straight foliage. Because the reason we're pulling those apart in the industry, we see those as the same. Consumers don't, because they see flowers and they're like, ooh, flowers. And so they see those as separately because it has a flower on it. And the price changes if there's flowers. Usually. And I'm going to put an asterisk on that, because if there's an interesting foliage, that can sway the boat. But if it's just a straight green plant and it has a flower on it, consumers are in general more likely to like it. So that's why we separate them out.
Okay. And we had a lot of questions, honestly, Mel, on the online sales. So I think what we need to do is probably talk about having a webinar in these, maybe January, to talk a little bit more and dive into online sales.
Let's do it.
Buy online, pick up in store, opportunities there. But with that in mind, I know we've kept folks a little bit past the top of the hour.
So sorry, everybody.
No. It was amazing information. So to be respectful of time, I think what we'll do is we'll definitely plan on something in January to dive into online sales more. But with that, I just want to sincerely thank you and sincerely thank Dr. Melinda Knuth and all of the different organizations that are doing this type of research for our industry. It's so imperative and so helpful. And it provides, I think, a great opportunity for us to be successful as an industry. And so with that, and on behalf of the entire Proven Winners organization, I just want to say thanks. Appreciate your time. Just a quick plug, the recording for this webinar will be available next week, and we'll send out details on how you can access that early next week. And with that, we'll say goodbye and thanks again.
All right. Thank you, everyone.